the left long ago determined, and I'm talking before the Bolshevik Revolution, that America was the enemy of world socialism. The American Constitution, where your rights come from God, had to be overturned. And they knew they could not do that from the outside. You know, nobody could sail across the Atlantic and expect to invade America or across the Pacific. So it would have to be a strategy of taking America down from the inside. And what is the bedrock of America? What is the bedrock of the American ethic, the American politics, American conservatism? It is the Christian church. This is a country founded with a constitution based on the Bible, right? So what are you going to do? You can't take down America, but you can infiltrate the churches, and you can turn the churches into vehicles for socialism. Now, the very first communist front established in this country was in 1912, before the Bolshevik Revolution, by the communist Harry Ward. It was the Methodist Committee for Social Action, and it was inside the Methodist Church. And what they do, they talk about, well, Christian charity becomes socialist giveaways. Welcoming the stranger becomes welcoming illegal immigrants. They twist the good doctrines of the Christian church into things that it doesn't necessarily mean, to basically turn it into a vehicle for socialism. So they've made major hay in the American Protestant churches for many years, to the point that a lot of people just left in disgust, and they went into the evangelical movement. They infiltrated the Catholic Church through what they call liberation theology, and now you have a Marxist Pope in Pope Francis, who's very close to Putin, supports no borders, just redistribution of wealth. If he had a communist hammer and sickle on his forehead, he would not act any differently from what he does today, effectively. But the big area that was clean for so long were the American evangelical churches and the Baptists. Now, these are the crazy people who go out and vote for Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan. When the socialists are doing all this great work in the colleges, and they've got the education system tied up, and they've got the media, and they've got Hollywood, these crazy conservative Christians break out and vote for patriotic candidates. This cannot be allowed.
Terrible.
This is terrible. This cannot be stopped. So in the last 10 years, mainly through a lot of it came through Jim Wallace and Sojourners, who was Obama's spiritual advisor. And a lot of it's come through the Gospel Coalition, Tim Keller's Gospel Coalition. Now, Tim Keller acknowledges a debt to the Frankfurt School, the old school of communists who fled Nazi Germany and moved to America in the 30s, who gave us political correctness and the sexual revolution. And several of the Gospel Coalition members are Marxists. And they are promoting social justice. They're promoting critical race theory, which is pure Marxism. They're, ending global warming, all this kind of stuff, welcoming illegal immigrants. You'll go to a lot of churches in America now. You'll hear nothing about sin or redemption. But you'll hear a lot about ending white privilege, getting on top of global warming, welcoming refugees, opening the borders, and wealth and social justice. That is Marxism. Like the Southern Baptists, Russell Moore, who's the head of the Southern Baptist Social Ethics Committee, the public policy wing of the Southern Baptist Church, also serves on the board of the Gospel Coalition. And he is introducing Marxism into the Baptist Church like you wouldn't believe. Like in a couple of months ago, they had their national convention in Alabama, and they introduced critical race theory, voted on the floor of the convention, which is now part of the Baptist Church toolbox for analyzing issues of race. Well, who invented critical race theory? It was a man called James Cone, a Marxist. James Cone went to Cuba in 1982 to meet Fidel Castro to work with Soviet Christian front groups, and he took a man with him, a man called Jeremiah Wright. You may have heard of him, Barack Obama's pastor, right? So critical race theory means that if you're white, you're automatically racist. Okay, and you are part of the white capitalist power structure. So the only way you can end racism is to end the white capitalist power structure. So you have to end racism through revolution. Now, this is all through the churches now, all through the seminaries. It's been taught in almost every major seminary. I got in our movie. We've got a little clip from St. Louis, Missouri, in 2015, and a woman called Michelle Higgins gets up, and this is a conference for young teenage evangelicals, and they're all fired up and mainly white because it's the Midwest. And she says, the thing that God wants you to do more than anything else is to end white privilege. Some of these kids might be on food stamps, but they've got to end white privilege. So they're all fired up. God wants us to end white privilege. God wants us to combat this imaginary racism in our churches. Michelle Higgins is a pastor. She is also a member of the Organization for Black Struggle, a Maoist communist group, which is the front for Liberation Road, which is the pro-Chinese Communist Party that gave us Black Lives Matter. So these kids are being taught straight Marxism and thinking it's Christianity.
Wow.
So this is endemic in the church.
To see your movie.
This blew me away. I expected it to be bad. It is absolutely horrific. And we want to start a counter movement to this. We want to highlight sound churches. A lot of people, they think, I want to go to church, and they look up the nearest church in the phone book. They go there. 60% chance it's a Marxist church. We're going to put up a whole list on our website of all the sound churches to go to.
That's
the ones that haven't been corrupted. So new Christians can go to these churches and not get indoctrinated straight off the bat.
Okay, Trevor, tell us again, where do we find out about enemies within the church?
Enemies within the church, just go to enemieswithinthechurch.com. You can see a trailer there, some essays, articles, and you can go and make a donation. We're about 95% funded, but we just want a little bit to finish it off and a bit for marketing, and we'll be set. We're already in the editing stages now.
Excellent. All right, now let's talk the third thing, your new book. The title is White House Reds, Communists, Socialists, and Security Risks Running for President 2020. There it is. Tell us, what's happening in the 2020 election? I mean, the COVID virus has changed the entire political landscape, but what's going on there, and what do we need to watch out for?
Well, what we need to, the big lie right now is that the Bernie Sanders is toast, well, which I think he is toast, but that's the end of the socialism in the Democratic Party. Bernie is the crazy socialist. The moderate Democrats stood up, said, no, we're not going to do this. Pete Buttigieg stood against them. Amy Klobuchar stood against them. Beto O'Rourke stood against them. Well, this is my thesis. Of the 23 major Democrats who stood in the race, 13 were Marxists. Of the 10 still running in January the 1st this year, 10 of them were Marxists. Every one of the leading contenders, except for Michael Bloomberg, who has his whole range of his own problems, come from a Marxist background. That is Joe Biden, that is Pete Buttigieg, that is Amy Klobuchar, that is Elizabeth Warren, that is Julian Castro, that is Cory Booker, that is Tom Steyer, that is Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, who a lot of conservatives quite like, has got heavy ties. Yes, she has got heavy ties to the Russians. Yes, she supports North Korea and Venezuela, and she has a very long history with Democratic Socialists of America and other Marxist groups. So what I'm saying is the Democratic Party at the top is completely taken over by Marxists, completely. So it doesn't matter whether Joe Biden gets it or Bernie comes back in some blaze of glory, or Michelle Obama comes out of, parachutes out of nowhere, or Hillary Clinton, comes down in a blaze of glory. All of them are Marxists. All of them have the same agenda.
New York Governor Cuomo also, right?
Well, Cuomo is very keen on China. He's very much a leftist. He would be, like, if you put Bernie as 10 out of 10 communist, Cuomo would be 8. Biden would be 9. You know, so what we're saying here is the difference between Biden and Bernie is that Bernie is a communist who's too stupid to hide it. Biden is a communist who's smart enough to hide it. Same with Amy Klobuchar. Same with Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg's father was one of the world's leading scholars on the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci, the president of the International Gramsci Society. This was his dad. Pete worked with Democratic Socialists of America and other Marxists all the way through his career as mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and he also worked with Democratic Socialists of America on the campaign trail. Tom Steyer, had Marxist links going back to Stanford University and had more Marxists on his campaign staff than any other candidate except for Bernie Sanders. Klobuchar had a history with Democratic Socialists of America going back to her university days. She went to the Soviet Union with her pro-Soviet father as a young woman. She worked with the Maoists of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, very tied into the Muslim radical left in Minnesota as well. And this is Mrs. Minnesota Nice, right?
Yeah,
this is the moderate.
You have all this documented in your new book.
You don't put out a 270-page book calling 10 leading Democrats Marxists as a foreigner without having the documentation, the photographs, and the references to back it up. There's just about as much reference pages in the book as there are actual text. But look at Joe Biden, right?